You are consuming fewer calories than you were at 45. You eliminated bread from your diet. You completely swore off sweets. You began taking early morning walks while the rest of your household was still asleep. Yet your abdominal fat stubbornly remains. That familiar softness in the mirror that was completely absent a decade ago rests right under your ribcage, completely unmoved as though your dedication achieved nothing. Facing this wall, most individuals either restrict their food even further or decide their metabolism is permanently damaged and accept this as an inevitable part of growing older. However, both of those assumptions are completely incorrect. Right now, I will explain precisely why by revealing the exact physiological pathway that both your tracking apps and your scale fail to detect. This is because the underlying issue has nothing to do with your daily caloric intake. The real culprit is a single hormone that shifts after age 60 into a state your system was never built to maintain long-term. Until you grasp what this chemical messenger is doing and the exact reasons behind its actions, you will continue reducing meals without seeing results. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button immediately. Doing so ensures this vital information continues reaching the audience that needs it the most. Before we proceed any further, I must speak candidly because your overall health takes priority over any routine. In certain cases, midsection fat storage is far more than a routine metabolic hurdle. If you have noticed sudden weight gain around your waist alongside intense exhaustion, thinning on the outer edges of your eyebrows, or ongoing puffiness in your face and legs, these symptoms together require professional medical evaluation. Requesting a thyroid lab panel, a morning cortisol assessment, and a fasting insulin test from your physician will clarify what is happening inside your body. Jot those 3 tests down right now. Be sure to request them explicitly at your appointment. These lab orders are generally inexpensive, yet most doctors will not run them unless you ask. If you are not experiencing these red flags, stay tuned because the following breakdown will completely change your perspective. Here is the false narrative the diet world has marketed for decades. It revolves entirely around calories consumed versus calories burned. Reduce your food intake and exercise more frequently. It is framed as simple energy balance, pure mathematical subtraction. That model is not entirely inaccurate. If you severely restrict food over a long period, your body will eventually shift. But for someone over 60, that equation is dangerously inadequate because it treats human biology like a basic calculator. Your body past 60 is simply not a calculator. It operates as a complex hormonal system, and the laws governing that system will override basic math every time. Here is what the calories in, calories out theory completely fails to address. Why does abdominal fat remain locked while weight drops elsewhere? And why does someone with identical diet, sleep, and activity habits as their neighbor store 10 extra pounds exclusively around their waistline? The explanation lies entirely within your endocrine system. The key regulator driving this process is a substance you are likely familiar with. You have probably heard it referred to as the stress hormone. What has been left out, however, is what this chemical does to deep fat tissue at a cellular level and why this pathway malfunctions past age 60 in an easily fixable manner. That primary hormone is cortisol. Nestled right above your kidneys, your adrenal glands manufacture cortisol whenever you face strain, whether from personal conflicts, poor sleep, physical discomfort, sudden expenses, or anxiety about family. In a younger, healthy frame, cortisol spikes to unlock energy, heighten focus, and navigate the stressor before receding within a couple of hours. The body resets itself seamlessly. However, 3 major shifts occur simultaneously after age 60 to block that natural reset. These 3 concurrent factors prevent the system from returning to baseline. First, the internal mechanism responsible for shutting off cortisol becomes sluggish. A critical neural pathway linked to the hippocampus works to turn off cortisol output once a threat subsides. As you age, that regulatory loop loses much of its sensitivity. While cortisol spikes as expected, it takes far longer to drop back down to normal levels. What should be brief spikes turn into prolonged internal exposure. Second, overall sleep quality declines. Most adults past 60 undergo noticeable changes in their sleep cycles. They spend less time in restorative deep sleep, endure frequent awakenings, and rise earlier in the morning. Each night of fragmented rest acts as a direct physical stressor on the body. In turn, every physical stressor triggers additional cortisol release. You fall asleep with high levels from daytime demands and wake up with high levels from nocturnal strain. The regulatory cycle never resets properly because true recovery demands unbroken deep sleep. Third, baseline systemic inflammation gradually increases. Clinical research confirms that low-grade inflammation rises significantly after 60. fueled by shifting sex hormones, lower activity, altered gut bacteria, and decades of environmental wear. Ongoing inflammation functions as its own constant cortisol stimulus. Your biology interprets this state as an ongoing crisis, keeping cortisol production steady. What follows is not a brief spike, it is a continuous wave. This represents a persistent elevation in baseline levels that was never intended to run continuously. It is subtle enough to avoid immediate alarm bells, yet it remains steady enough to lock your metabolism into a single pattern. This brings us directly to why abdominal fat accumulates. Body fat is not created equal across all areas. Subcutaneous fat, which sits right beneath the skin and can be pinched, functions in a standard fashion. Visceral fat, which surrounds your vital organs deep inside the abdomen, operates under entirely different rules. It is far more than a simple storage depot for excess energy. In reality, it acts as an active endocrine organ. It actively secretes hormones. It dispatches inflammatory chemical signals throughout the system. Most importantly, it features a distinct pattern of cellular receptors. Deep abdominal fat cells contain roughly 4 times the concentration of cortisol receptors found in other fat cells. Imagine your body as a large facility and cortisol as a delivery truck making frequent drop-offs. Naturally, every shipment gets delivered to the location with the highest number of loading docks. That primary location is your deep belly. Whenever cortisol levels climb, regardless of the underlying cause, the signal impacts visceral fat with 4 times the force felt in other tissue. Those cells receive the message far more intensely. They react at a much faster rate. They store incoming energy with far greater aggression. In ancestral environments, this mechanism was not an evolutionary flaw. Storing accessible energy near vital organs served as a crucial survival strategy during extended food shortages. Cortisol signaled that a resource crisis was occurring, directing the body to safeguard core organs by storing fat centrally. The complication today is that your physiology cannot tell the difference between a real famine and 3 straight nights of broken sleep. Whether facing a wild predator or enduring years of chronic household stress, the internal chemical signal remains identical. Cortisol increases, visceral tissue responds, and storage occurs. Here is where the mechanism creates a locked vault effect. Cortisol does not merely encourage visceral fat storage, it explicitly inhibits the breakdown of that fat. When this hormone remains continuously elevated, it suppresses the enzymes required to mobilize deep fat for energy. The internal storage vault essentially seals shut. You could walk 5 miles daily while keeping intake low, yet your visceral fat stays locked while your system burns other resources, such as lean muscle tissue. You are not failing to drop waist size due to a lack of self-discipline. You are simply trying to open a hormonal lock using a caloric key. That tool will not work. The challenge grows more complex because cortisol functions alongside other hormones. Persistent cortisol signals your liver to pour extra glucose into the bloodstream, preparing your body for a high-energy emergency that never comes. Circulating blood sugar climbs. Your pancreas reacts by pumping out insulin. Glucose levels drop back down, but elevated insulin continues to circulate through your system. When this cycle repeats over months and years, a fundamental shift takes place inside your cells. Cellular receptor doors no longer respond as efficiently to insulin signals. This condition is known as insulin resistance, and research indicates it affects a huge number of adults past 60, most of whom remain undiagnosed because early stages produce no obvious physical sensations. Here is what insulin resistance does to your midsection in particular. Insulin functions primarily as a storage regulator. When insulin remains high while cells resist it, the biochemical signal to store fat grows stronger while the signal to release fat fades. Visceral fat cells, already sensitized by cortisol, receive a double directive to retain all stored energy. At this stage, the self-reinforcing feedback loop closes tightly. Reduced insulin sensitivity generates continuous low-grade inflammation. That systemic inflammation triggers additional cortisol production. Higher cortisol levels promote further visceral fat storage and deeper insulin resistance. The cycle continues to feed itself automatically. Restricting food even further tightens this loop, as severe calorie restriction elevates cortisol levels even more. The body interprets sharp restriction as a survival threat, locking the fat storage vault even tighter. This is fundamentally not a matter of willpower. It is a closed hormonal feedback loop. You simply cannot break an endocrine loop using a standard calorie deficit alone. Consider the experience of a 67-year-old woman named Dorothy. She arrived with a food diary she had diligently maintained over a 4-month period. Every single meal was tracked and weighed with precision. She had lowered her daily energy intake from roughly 2,000 calories down to 1,400. She had also added a 45-minute morning walk to her daily routine, something she had never done consistently in the past. After 4 full months of effort, she had lost roughly 2 pounds total. She noted with dry humor that both lost pounds seemed to come directly from her face. Her midsection had not changed at all. She had already requested 2 separate thyroid lab panels. Both lab reports came back within normal ranges. She assumed her body was simply undergoing the inevitable changes of menopause, a permanent state she had to accept. Within minutes of our conversation, I set her food log aside. Instead, I shifted the focus to her daily life and routine. When asked about sleep, she revealed that she woke up around 3 in the morning almost every night and remained awake for over an hour, a pattern she had experienced for years without connecting it to her metabolism. When asked about ongoing stress, she shared that her husband had been battling a severe health condition for 2 years. She was overseeing his medical care, managing the household, and balancing a part-time job. Stress, as she put it, had simply become the background atmosphere of her daily existence. I recommended 2 targeted lab tests, a morning cortisol evaluation and a fasting insulin level. These 2 checks are rarely included in standard physicals because routine guidelines do not demand them, and preventative screening offers little incentive to typical clinic models. Her morning cortisol returned noticeably elevated, not high enough to indicate a primary adrenal condition, but consistently above an optimal baseline. Her fasting insulin level was nearly triple what would be expected for someone with her body weight and physical activity level. It was a classic demonstration of early-stage insulin resistance. Her hormonal feedback loop was operating at maximum capacity. Nobody had previously evaluated these markers. No practitioner had requested those specific laboratory values. She was not overeating or failing her dietary goals. Her physiology was trapped in a hormonal state that kept fat tissue locked regardless of her calorie intake. 4 months of strict dieting had yielded no progress because the underlying hormonal barrier remained unaddressed. Here are 2 assessments you can perform prior to your next medical visit. First, ask specifically for a fasting insulin test rather than a standard fasting glucose test, which often only detects issues after years of cumulative metabolic damage. Measuring fasting insulin identifies early metabolic dysfunction long before blood sugar levels begin to rise. An optimal fasting insulin reading falls between 2 and 5 microunits per milliliter. A result between 6 and 10 indicates early resistance, while anything above 10 represents actionable metabolic dysfunction. Jot down the words fasting insulin and mention them clearly to your physician. Second, try this simple home observation tonight by sitting quietly 2 hours after dinner and resting your hand just above your navel. Pay close attention to whether you feel persistent warmth, fullness, or mild distension remaining from your meal. Track how long that physical sensation remains present. If that fullness continues after 2.5 to 3 hours, your digestive tract may be experiencing slowed gastric emptying, a documented effect of elevated cortisol that further aggravates insulin issues. This is not a formal diagnostic test, but rather an insightful pattern to observe over the course of a week. Currently, 3 common daily habits may be reinforcing your cortisol and insulin loop. The first habit involves waking during the night and immediately checking your smartphone screen. When you wake up between 2 and 4 in the morning, unable to drift back to sleep, cortisol has likely spiked. This chemical spike acts as a biological mechanism designed to keep you alert during what your body senses as an unnatural waking window. Staring at a bright screen in that moment prolongs cortisol elevation by keeping your sympathetic nervous system engaged. If you struggle to fall back asleep, rest quietly in the dark without reaching for your device, allowing your cortisol levels to taper down naturally. The second habit is consuming isolated carbohydrates for breakfast, such as plain toast, fruit juice, cereal, or unadorned oatmeal. These foods trigger a swift rise in blood sugar and an exaggerated insulin release in anyone dealing with early insulin resistance. By mid-morning, your blood sugar plummets, prompting a compensatory cortisol surge that restarts the entire cycle before noon. The solution is not to cut out carbohydrates entirely. Instead, focus on meal sequencing by eating healthy fats and proteins first, followed by or alongside your carbohydrates. That single adjustment noticeably dampens your body's insulin response. The third factor is remaining seated for more than 90 minutes at a time without taking a break. Your skeletal muscles serve as the primary destination for absorbing blood glucose. When muscles stay immobile for extended stretches, their ability to take up glucose drops sharply. As a result, your body must produce additional insulin to clear the same amount of sugar. Repeating this sedentary pattern throughout the day creates a compounding negative effect on insulin sensitivity. You do not need an intense workout routine. Simply standing up and walking around for 2 minutes every hour and a half serves as the complete strategy, which you can easily manage with a simple phone reminder. Here is a step-by-step protocol where every element is backed by a distinct physiological purpose. First thing in the morning, spend 10 minutes outdoors in natural sunlight without sunglasses within an hour of waking up. Exposure to early daylight resets your circadian rhythm, anchoring your cortisol peak to the morning so levels decline smoothly throughout the day. This practice is grounded firmly in foundational circadian biology rather than soft wellness advice. At breakfast, consume healthy fats and proteins before any carbohydrates, such as eggs cooked in butter, full-fat plain yogurt with walnuts, or smoked salmon on cucumber slices to slow digestion and reduce the subsequent blood sugar surge by 30 to 40%. Prior to lunch and dinner, complete 4 cycles of slow breathing by inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 2, and exhaling for 6. This controlled breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, helping lower circulating cortisol in a matter of minutes. Approaching a meal in a calm physiological state enhances your insulin sensitivity during digestion. Interrupt every 90 minutes of sitting with 2 minutes of movement, using an alarm to build a powerful prescription-free habit for insulin health. In the evening, turn off electronic screens 90 minutes prior to sleep to prevent blue light from suppressing melatonin and driving up nighttime cortisol when it should reach its lowest point. Before bed, drink 1 tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar diluted in water, as acetic acid helps slow carbohydrate digestion and lower fasting glucose levels in those with early insulin resistance. Follow this with 10 minutes of progressive muscle relaxation, systematically tensing each muscle group from your feet up to your shoulders for 5 seconds before releasing. Releasing physical muscle tension signals complete safety to your nervous system, allowing nighttime cortisol production to turn off. To start tonight, turn off screens 1 hour before bed if 90 minutes feels like too large of a leap. Tomorrow morning, step outside without sunglasses within an hour of waking and stand in the daylight for 10 minutes. For breakfast tomorrow, eat foods containing fat and protein before consuming any carbohydrates. Set a repeating 90-minute timer on your phone right now and move around for 2 minutes every time it sounds. During your next medical checkup, explicitly request a fasting insulin test and review the resulting number. Share your current age in the comments below, as this protocol can be tailored specifically depending on whether you are 58 or 74 due to differences in sleep architecture and metabolic patterns. 4 weeks after starting morning light exposure and protein-focused meal sequencing, Dorothy noticed her 3 a.m. awakenings becoming far less frequent until they stopped altogether, along with a lifting of her usual morning fatigue. By 6 weeks, her waistband fit measurably looser without major changes to her diet, simply because key points in her hormonal loop had been successfully disrupted. Your body is not broken, it is reacting logically to an altered internal environment that simply needs targeted adjustments. If this explanation reshaped your understanding of your metabolism, share this video with anyone struggling with stubborn abdominal weight so they can finally find the clarity they need. If you have done everything right yet see no progress around your waistline, elevated cortisol is likely the primary driver. There is one additional nightly factor exacerbating this entire process that will be covered in the next video.